Welcome back to the Career Profiles podcast. I'm your host, Sean, and this is part 4 of the Mike Tyson Career Profile. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the next installment of his life story. Really looking forward to delivering this one for you guys. If you've not already heard any of the first 3 parts, then I strongly recommend that you go back and listen to those before you get to this point, because you will get a full synopsis of what's going on in Mike's life leading up to this 4th part in Mike's story. Now, before I get into the episode, as always, just want to thank you for listening to the first 3 parts. Thank you for the interactions on Spotify and social media, for all the comments, and of course the interactions on YouTube. And thank you for those that have been subscribing via Patreon and continuing to support the podcast. If you're not a patron, please do go check out patreon.com. It is the best way to be able to support the podcast network and allow us to be able to continue bringing you these epic stories. So, we left it in part 3, where Mike Tyson had a fight and was victorious against Steve Zowski, but injured his eardrum in the process. Now, we left it at the point where Mike Tyson had to postpone his next upcoming fight because of a hospitalization. And he was supposed to be fighting James Quick Tillis next, so that had to be postponed. So we pick up from that part onwards as we go into part 4. Now, after spending time in the hospital, a short amount of time, it's about 10 days, he leaves Mount Sinai Hospital and returns to Catskill, New York to resume his training program for the Tillis fight. After that rest and recuperation, he was a new man. He had matured considerably in the 10 days spent in isolation, making full use of his time away from home to reflect on his short but hectic career as a sports celebrity, and on the distractions that had caused him to ignore his trade and betray his promise to his deceased manager, Cus D'Amato. Cus had warned him about the dangers he would have to face when he became a celebrity. They discussed these very possibilities many times over the years as the former Brooklyn street urchin was growing and developing, both physically and emotionally. Cus told Mike that the hardest thing he would have to face was how to handle himself once he became a celebrity. Cus had said to him, "It's difficult getting to the top, but it's more difficult handling the success once you've achieved your goal." Now, Mike understood what the venerable old trainer was trying to tell him. Now he was back on track, and he promised not to make the same mistake twice. Mike returned to the gym on April 7th to begin his training program for the Quick Tillis fight, and he was all business. He knew he only had 4 weeks to get ready for his toughest fight of his career, and he didn't want to waste a minute of it. Mike attacked his training program and his sparring partners with a vengeance. The kid from Catskill knocked out the lower front teeth of one sparring partner, Charlie Tombstone Smith, and he punished former world-class heavyweight Jimmy Young, dropping him with a vicious left hook. Young, who had driven George Foreman into retirement and who had lost a controversial 15-round title fight against Muhammad Ali, was impressed by the youngster's talent. He said, "You're not allowed to bat your eye. He knocked me down the first day and the second day, and I don't get knocked down in the gym." In the opposition camp, James Quick Tillis was also busy mastering the fundamentals. The 28-year-old fighting cowboy from Tulsa, Oklahoma, was on a 4-fight losing streak, including decision losses to Jerry Coatsy and Tyrell Biggs. But those bouts were now ancient history. Admittedly, Tillis was out of condition for those fights, but against Mike, he had something to prove. He had the best reason of all to get into top condition. It was an incentive for him. Mike was the hottest piece of boxing property to come along since Jack Dempsey, and Mr. Tillis wanted to show the world that he was the better man. Come May the 3rd, Mike had better be in the best shape of his short career, because James Quick Tillis was coming to fight, and he was loaded for that fight. Tillis arrived in Glen Falls, brimming with confidence for his big match, and he was sure he knew how to beat Tyson. He said, "You've got to keep moving against Tyson. You've got to go side to side, in and out, keep moving so he can't catch you. Hold him, rope him, all that stuff. My great-grandfather was a cowboy, so it's in my blood. From root to the fruit, I'm in this game to make big money, and I wouldn't want to work hard and train hard just to be punching bag for somebody else. I want to get back on top, in the limelight." More than 7,500 screaming fans were on hand to welcome Iron Mike to the Glens Falls Civic Centre. He was glad to be back after a 7-week layoff caused by the ear infection that pushed the Tillis fight back from its original March 29th date. Mike said, "The hospital was the best thing that ever happened to me. It was like a vacation. Not being in the gym took off a lot of pressure and gave me time to think and relax. I thought about what I wanted to do. Did I want to be a playboy and hang out or fight? I found out I wanted to fight." The bell sounded and Mike came out swinging. Mike was his usual aggressive self, bobbing and weaving, moving forward and mixing hard rights and lefts to the body with an occasional shot to the head. It was obvious that he intended to try and take Tillis out early, but James Tillis came prepared. He was in great physical condition and he was ready for Mike's tactics. He slipped most of Mike's rushes rather easily, although he did take a few hard shots in the process. Mostly, he kept the young brawler at bay, pushing him away when he got close and landing several good counter-punches of his own in the process. One uppercut in particular caught Mike clean, but left no ill effects on the youngster's sturdy chin. Mike landed a solid right to the head early in round 2, but Tillis grabbed and clinched immediately. Mike continued to pursue his man throughout the round, but couldn't catch the dancing cowboy. The Catskill teenager then shifted tactics in the next round, becoming more of a boxer and less of a brawler. The early part of the round was dominated by frequent clinches as the main man from Tulsa wouldn't let the young slugger cut loose on him. But that scenario finally ended when Mike trapped his man on the ropes and unloaded. A hard right to the body was followed by a left hook to the head. Now the punches came fast and furious as Mike unleashed a vicious attack to press his advantage. Left, right, left. A hard right to the side of the head knocked Tillis sideways along the ropes. Half a dozen more punches found their mark before Tillis could tie up his energetic adversary. In spite of all of Mike's punishment, the fighting cowboy was back on the balls of his feet, dancing away from danger and bringing feelings of doubt to the young boxer. Tillis caught Mike with several good left hooks in round 4, but Mike walked right through them like nothing had happened. That was a plus for Mike, because Tillis was a known hard puncher. He had Marvis Fraser on the canvas, he had Greg Page down, and he dropped Carl Williams twice. But the tough New Yorker didn't even acknowledge that he had been hit. At one point in the round, Mike went in to a low crouch that left the top of his head even with Tillis' knee. After a subsequent clinch, the Oklahoma cowboy lunged at his man with a hard left to the head that missed. Mike slipped the punch as Tillis went by, spun around, and caught the off-balance fighter with a left hook, dropping into the canvas, more surprised than hurt. As the middle of the fight approached, Mike became very tentative. He wasn't his usual busy self in the clinches. He put together no rapid-fire combinations, and he seemed to have lost some of his drive. The crowd became curious. Was it out of respect for Tillis? Or was he now in awe of his crafty opponent? Or was he tired? Or was he pacing himself? What was his problem? On one scorecard, Mike had won rounds 2, 3, 4 and 6, with rounds 1 and 5 being scored even. Tillis hadn't won a single round at that point, but suddenly he began to come on, and Mike began to fade. Mike managed to come out on top in a sluggish round 7, but rounds 8 and 9 were dominated by the Oklahoma cowboy, although they were so dull that Kevin Rooney implored his young charge to keep punching, don't stop in the clinches. The final round was no different. Mike kept the lid on it until the final 30 seconds when he opened up and finished with a flurry. Mike eked out a close decision by 6-4, 6-4 and an 8-2 count, but he left many questions unanswered in the process. He certainly didn't impress anyone with his lackadaisical performance in this fight. The days that followed the Tillis fight were times of soul-searching for the Tyson camp. The fight itself had been less than an artistic success, and unkind guttural murmurings could already be heard throughout the boxing world. First of all, the fans were unhappy. Tyson followers across the country had expected Mike to claim his 20th consecutive victim via the knockout route, when his inability to do so left them disgruntled and angry. Boxing fans in general, of course, are a bloodthirsty lot, and Tyson fans in particular crave their share of the sticky red stuff. Nothing less than witnessing an opponent being bludgeoned into unconsciousness will satisfy the appetite for gore and mayhem. Boxing experts around the nation were also dissatisfied with Mike's lethargic performance, and they continued to question his determination and his stamina over the 10-round distance. Certainly, his inactivity over the last 4 rounds of the fight fan the flames of that still raging controversy. Mike had been content just to lay on his opponent and rest whenever Tillis tied him up in rounds 7 through 10, his dynamite right hand hanging useless at his side. At a time when he should have been taking Tillis apart piece by piece with devastating body shots, Mike just didn't do anything. Did he have enough stamina to compete in the heavyweight ranks over a grueling 10 to 15 rounds, or was he strictly just a 6-round fighter? Of course, the jury was still out on that question. The brain trust of the Tyson Group set about to answer that question to their own satisfaction. One thing that all the members of the Tyson camp agreed upon was that a fighter's first 10-round bout is a more than punishing physical effort. It's a frightening excursion into the unknown. It's a mind-boggling psychological obstacle that must be overcome, a mysterious, tenuous wall that has to be breached before a boxer can pass from the club fighter stage into the arena of the professional pugilist. Self-doubts play on one's mind, making the task at hand larger than life size, until it appears to be an insurmountable barrier of mammoth proportions. A boxer's character is tested at times like these. He needs to keep his goal in the proper perspective and proceed towards it one step at a time. You must challenge the training regime day to day, always keeping sight of his objective and determining what will be required of him in order to achieve it. And on fight night, the same procedure must be followed. The fighter must maintain an absolute concentration, focus all his energies on the fight one round at a time, and not let the big picture overwhelm him. If he does this, and if his conditioning has been satisfactory, he's going to succeed, and the 10-round demon will be crushed forever. Mike had breached the wall, although in retrospect it seemed at times as if he had tiptoed over it. Still, the 10-round hurdle was a thing of the past, and a sigh of relief could be heard emanating from the secluded confines of Catskill, New York. Jim Jacobs, for one, was more than satisfied with Mike's performance. He passed the test, and in the process, he had laid a good beating on Tillis for the first 6 rounds. Had he not gone into a shell over the last 4 rounds in order to conserve his energy, it's very likely that he would have made Tillis knockout victim number 20. Kevin Rooney had rated Mike's achievement a C+ in his School of Hard Knocks. The young trainer graded his students just like a college professor, marking their level of skill and execution in areas such as defence, aggressiveness, ringmanship, effort and consistency. According to Rooney, none of his students will ever achieve a perfect mark of A+ on their report card, as noted previously. Tyson's C+ was considered satisfactory for this stage of his development, although it was far from outstanding. Rooney predicted, however, that Mike would be advancing to the B level in his upcoming fights and should be producing straight A's consistently by the end of the year, just in time to challenge for the title. Certainly Rooney could breathe a little easier after the Tillis fight. He had done his job, and he had done it well. Mike was in superb physical condition and was able to compete at a high level of consistency over the 10-round distance. From the looks of it, he could have extended his effort to 12 or 15 rounds without a problem. Mike finished the fight with a lot of gas left in his tank, and the fact that he became ultra-conservative as the fight progressed was not Rooney's fault. The mind plays strange tricks on a person, and Mike had struggled with the mind game for weeks prior to the Tillis fight. He was troubled and tormented by the demons of self-doubt, but in the end, he emerged victorious. It was time for Mike to look ahead to his next hurdle, another 10-round test against the WBC's 7th-rated contender, the Bronx bad boy, Mitch Blood Green. Mike had only 17 days to prepare for the fight, which would be held in the High Temple of Boxing, New York's Madison Square Garden. The fight would not only be a boxing match, it would be an event. Jim Jacobs, Bill Caton and HBO would see to that. This was Mike's first fight for HBO under his $1 million contract, and both his managers and the people at HBO wanted to make the most of it. The fight was being promoted by HBO in conjunction with Don King Productions. Now, for those who don't know Don King, the flamboyant one, well, he was a typical American success story for many. Born in Cleveland in 1933, King and his sister and his 4 brothers were raised by their mother after their father was killed in an industrial accident. As a teenager, King operated on the fringes of the criminal element in town, eventually working his way into the position of the numbers czar. King's world came crashing down around his ears, however, one night in 1965 when he accidentally killed a man during an argument. His conviction on a manslaughter charge resulted in a 4-year stint in the Marion Correctional Institution. Once released, King decided that he could make as much money legally as he could running numbers, and with none of the risks. In short time, he'd become a boxing manager, his first notable fighter being the Acorn, Muhammad Ali's favourite name for the tough, hard-hitting and bald Ernie Shavers, whose contract Don King purchased from former Major League pitcher Dean Chance for $8,000. 2 years later, King branched out into promoting fights, eventually snatching the brass ring with the Foreman Ali match in Zaire on October the 30th, 1974. In addition to his multifaceted business acumen, Don King was also a showman of the first magnitude. Of course, he wears his hair in that long, wild afro style, looking like a man with a finger in a light socket. The gaudy diamond-studded rings that dominate his hands complement his sequin tuxedos, frilled shirts and gold necklaces. One national magazine probably came closest to characterising Don King when it referred to him as flamboyant, ostentatious, cunning, ruthless, part businessman, part conman, part riverboat gambler, part revivalist preacher, and brilliant. And the man knows how to make money. Jacobs and Caton, HBO and Don King were embarking on the final phase of the campaign to sell Mike Tyson. The Mitch Green fight would mark the beginning of the gigantic promotion that was designed to culminate in a Mike Tyson fight on HBO late in the year. The first step in the plan was to move Mike's training camp to New York City, where a major media blitz could be initiated. During the second week of May, the Tyson camp was uprooted and moved from the backwoods of Catskill to the Gramercy gym in Manhattan. Rooney insisted on Gramercy this time because, as he told Bob Smith at the Daily Mail, everybody goes to Gleason's, but I would always train in the Gramercy gym because it was Cus's gym. It's cleaner and bigger than most of the other gyms in the area. In the boxing world, the Gramercy gym was known as the gym that Cus built. Mike Tyson's first task in the big city was not sparring, it was not running, and it was not doing calisthenics. It was playing another game of Meet the Press, a chore that Tyson always despised. Mike got tired of answering the same old questions over and over. He'd say, "I'm looking forward to fighting in Madison Square Garden. All the great fights in history have been fought in the Garden. It's a great opportunity. I love what I do. I'd fight 3 times a week if I could." And it just went on and on and on, and it was the same repetitive stuff for him. There was a slight possibility that the fight would not even be held in Madison Square Garden, but would be preempted by a professional hockey game. The New York Rangers were playing in the Stanley Cup playoffs, and should they make it to the finals, the 6th game would be played on May the 20th in the Garden. If the remote possibility came to pass, the fight would have to be moved next door to the Felt Forum, the smaller 4,000-seat arena in the Garden complex. Shortly after Mike arrived in New York, Don King scheduled a press conference in the Waldorf Astoria to introduce both fighters to the press and hopefully lay the groundwork for a crowd-appealing and money-making hate-hate relationship between the two fighters. Mitch Blood Green did his part to bring about that hate-hate relationship. Mitchell Green was a native of the Harlem section of the Bronx. He was a tough street kid who had to fight for survival from the time he was old enough to walk. When he was still a youngster, his fights often ended with the other guy cut and bleeding, causing one of his buddies to remark, "They ought to call you Blood." And so Blood it was. Mitchell Green had earned a nickname. But that was all Mitchell Green had. That and his life in the streets. Mitch Green perked up at the press conference for the Tyson fight as he paraded back and forth around the head table, decked out in an outlandish outfit complete with a long gold earring and a Panama hat. Blood Green boasted about how he would destroy the Tyson legend. He said, "I'm not no bum. Tyson, as for you, I'm going to break your neck. You can't whoop me. Look at me good, like I told you before. This is Blood, Mitchell Green. I'm not one of those duffel bags who lay on the ropes. If you show up at Madison Square Garden, you're gone." Well, poor Mitch Green should have listened to those young kids on the streets of the Bronx who warned him, "I don't think you can mess with Tyson, buddy. Mike's a quiet man. He doesn't say much and he doesn't make disparaging remarks about his opponents. But he also doesn't like people making disparaging remarks about him." As he eyed Green's histrionics, his expression remained placid, but his steely eyes were already planning revenge. Mike's revenge always took place in the ring. His only public remarks were, if he makes a mistake, he's going to find out for the first time how it feels to get knocked out. You can do a lot of things to Mike Tyson, but intimidating him is a different matter. The week proceeded quietly in training camp, with Mike doing his road work in Central Park and his ring work in the Gramercy gym. He got in a lot of sparring with heavyweights Wes Smith and Melvin Epps under the watchful eye of trainer Kevin Rooney. Rooney also worked Mike hard on the bags, the jump rope and the exercise equipment. Still, the media blitz continued unabated, making it difficult for Tyson and Rooney to concentrate on the task at hand. One day Mike appeared with Bill Mazer on Sports Extra Channel 5 New York. During the interview, Mike emphasised the fact that he was going to be the champion of the world someday, and he impressed his host with his knowledge of boxing trivia, although he was openly flustered at being asked to parade his wisdom before the American public. When Mazer asked Mike who Mickey Walker was, Mike replied, "Oh God, don't do that to me. You embarrass me." He also exhibited the humorous side of Mike Tyson to the TV audience. So, now we get to fight night, and Madison Square Garden was theirs. 6,529 boxing fans pushed their way through the turnstiles to witness another Tyson demolition derby. Don King and HBO billed the fight as an interborough war, with Mitch Blood Green representing the Bronx and Mike upholding the honour of Brooklyn. Most of the crowd was hoping to see Mike score a quick and awesome knockout, but Mike himself had other plans. Mike was angered over Green's insulting remarks during the weeks preceding the fight and was determined to make Green pay for his braggadocio. His plan was to punish Green for the full 10 rounds, giving him a sound beating but never taking advantage of an opportunity to knock him out. Mike wanted to make Green quit if he could. Mike came out fast when the bell rang, and he came out swinging. After the first 20 or 30 Tyson hooks, a look of doubt came over Green's face. Mike was a man on a mission, and Green was the target. The big man's eyes showed concern almost from the start, and he was forced to backpedal and fight a defensive fight before the onslaught of the teenage tiger. To his credit, he fought back when cornered, and he caught his assailant with some telling punches. Still, Mike took the shots without notice and moved inexorably forward. In round 2, the stone-faced Tyson hit Green with a straight jab that sent his mouthpiece flying into the crowd. Green responded by holding Mike behind the head with his left hand and banging 4 solid shots in with his right. There were some good exchanges in the early going, with both fighters winging and landing some good punches. In round 3, Mike's hook knocked Green's mouthpiece out again, this time with a bridge and 2 teeth in it. By now, Mitch Blood Green was becoming very discouraged. The red stuff that covered his trunks was coming from his own mouth instead of his opponent's. In between rounds, he sat dejectedly on his stool and shook his head in disbelief. Mike was just too much for him. In the other corner, Mike was enjoying himself. He had the fight well in hand, and he was executing his move with complete confidence. He continued mixing his punches well, throwing a stiff jab followed by vicious hooks to the body and a variety of punishing uppercuts and headshots. And every punch was thrown with bad intentions. In round 5, Mike taunted Green for a minute or so. After talking to his opponent, Mike laughed at Green and dared the big man to hit him. Mike moved forward, bobbing and weaving, not throwing any punches, just slipping every punch that Green threw at him, thoroughly enjoying his defensive abilities. Between rounds 8 and 9, Mike's exuberance surfaced once again. In the middle of a Rooney lecture, Mike glanced up at his intense trainer, smiled, and then kissed him on the cheek. All was well in the Tyson camp. In the end, it was a Tyson runaway. He won the fight handily, with Green winning 1 round at most. Mike was still not winded after 30 minutes of constant activity, where he threw almost 500 punches. At the post-fight interview, Mike confirmed his fight plan. He said, "I don't want to sound brutish or anything. I didn't want to knock him out. I wanted to put a lot of pressure on him and make him decide himself whether to give up or not. I hit him with some rugged punches, but not devastating punches. I knew he was a professional, and if he went down from those punches, he would have given up. And I must take my hat off to him. He's a very tough individual." Mike himself probably summed it up a little bit better later down the line when he said, "I'm just a 19-year-old kid, having a lot of fun." With the Green fight history, the selling of Mike Tyson took off in high gear. Bill Caton's strategy for the rest of the year was to keep Mike close to New York City, the media capital of the world, with an occasional side trip to a West Coast counterpart, Los Angeles. Mike was scheduled to fight in New York City area for another 8 to 10 times before challenging for the title in November or December. In between fights, Caton and Jacobs would see to it that Mike attended as many noteworthy events as possible, making sure to be photographed with famous people in the process. He would also be seen in the company of the world's most beautiful models and starlets. The New York newspapers were soon full of Mike's photos. His gold, gap-toothed grin was everywhere. One day, he was at Gracie Mansion trading jokes with Mayor Edward Koch, and the next day, he was at the Yankee Stadium autographing baseball for superstar Dave Winfield. He even found the time to make the newsprint in the clutches of penthouse pet Cody Carmack. Kevin Rooney and Jim Jacobs had to be very careful that they didn't overdo the promo bit to the exclusion of Mike's conditioning program. After all, Mike was first and foremost a boxer who was still in pursuit of the title. Getting him in condition for his next fight, only 24 days away, was paramount. His opponent, Reggie Gross, was already in training and he was intent on derailing the Catskill Express. Gross, out of Baltimore, Maryland, was no pushover. His record showed 18 wins and 4 losses against some stiff competition, mostly in the cruiserweight division. In his 2 most recent fights, Gross had scored an impressive 8-round knockout over highly rated Burt Cooper, then lost a tough 10-round decision to Mike's old nemesis, Henry Tillman. Come June 13th in Madison Square Garden, Reggie Gross would be standing in front of Mike. He's determined to make him his 19th victim. The sparring sessions in the Cus D'Amato gym were fast and furious during the early part of June, as Mike Tyson tangled with some tough competition. In addition to his regular sparring partner, Dion Burgess, Mike was forced to contend with tough Anthony Davis. As everyone knew, Tyson's sparring sessions were no different from regular bouts. They were wars, with no quarter asked or given, and Mike Tyson fought them without the protective headgear, which he was not allowed to wear unless there was a medical problem that necessitated its use. "We want guys who aren't afraid to throw bombs," said Kevin Rooney. Anthony Davis was like that, and Rooney appreciated it. But Anthony Davis was no match for a fired-up Mike Tyson, and he had to call a halt to one sparring session after Mike had bloodied his nose. "Whoa, it's like a rock. I've got to stop." Sharing the spotlight with Mike Tyson in Catskill was Edwin Chapo Rosario, who was headlining the June 13th Garden card in a WBC title fight against champion Hector Macho Camacho. Tyson usually worked out in the gym from 12:30 to 2:30, followed by Rosario from 3 to 5. Chapo, at 16-1 with 16 KOs, was extremely confident of taking the title away from the Macho Man. His record stood at 29-0 with 16 KOs. While Mike was focusing his energies on Reggie Gross, his manager Bill Caton was busy announcing his next 3 fights. On June 28th, according to Caton, Mike was scheduled to meet William Hosea in the RPI Fieldhouse in Troy, New York. Less than 2 weeks later, he would step into the ring at the Stevensville Country Club in the Catskill Mountains to take on Lorenzo Boyd, and on July 26, Mike would be paired with Marvis Fraser in the Glens Falls Civic Center. When fight night arrived, 10,000 fans filed into Madison Square Garden on what was billed as Resurrection Night by the metropolitan media, who were intent on rebuilding the Garden's reputation as a major boxing arena. The Tyson fight, in fact, was only a secondary fight that evening, yielding the limelight to the WBC lightweight title fight between Camacho and Rosario. When Reggie Gross stepped into the ring, it looked like it would be a long night from the kid from Catskill. Gross, who stood 6 feet tall, had filled out as a heavyweight and carried 218 pounds on his sturdy frame, 1 pound more than Mike. Mentally, Gross was ready for the challenge. He was determined to carry the fight to the youngster, and he was confident that he would destroy the Tyson myth during the course of the evening. The fight turned out to be short and sweet, at least as far as Mike was concerned. Mike came out quickly as usual, determined to take Gross out in the first round. Gross was just as determined to stand his ground and mix with the young New Yorker. Midway through the round, Gross went on the offensive, throwing a flurry of punches at the teenage sensation. Mike ducked under a hard right thrown by the determined Gross and took a short left uppercut that caught him flush on the chin. Another short left missed its mark, and a hard right failed to connect as Mike calmly moved out of harm's way. Still, another right and left found nothing but air as the elusive Tyson bobbed and weaved like a magician. A solid right uppercut finally found its mark and stood Mike straight up. But the New Yorker's bull-like neck absorbed most of the force of the devastating blow, leaving Mike alert and ready to counter-attack, which he did. After another gross right sailed over his head, Mike leaped out of his crouch with a roundhouse left that found Gross's right cheekbone, dumping the Baltimore fighter on his back. Gross crawled to the ropes on his hands and knees and pulled himself upright at the count of 7. But his glassy-eyed stare was evidence that the fight was almost over. Mike followed up his advantage with determination, and 2 more left hooks put his courageous opponent down again. Gross was beaten, but his heart wouldn't admit it, and once again, he pulled his battered body upright. Referee Johnny Lobianco grabbed the wobbly fighter and waved an end to the fight at 2 minutes and 36 seconds of round 1. The fight had been short, but it wasn't easy. After the fight, Mike was ecstatic over his quick victory. He said, "I was looking forward to fighting Gross because of his good performances against Cooper and Tillman. I wanted to prove something tonight. I was determined to knock him out in the first round." When his manager, Jim Jacobs, arrived, Mike was all smiles. "I can't believe how I avoided all those punches. He was throwing. It was weird." Jacobs smiled. "That's because you're elusive, Mike. You're very elusive." One of the reporters questioned Mike about the right uppercut that Gross laid on him. He said, "I saw the punch coming and I braced myself for it. It looked devastating, but it wasn't. I wanted him to stand there and trade punches with me." Mike's stablemate, Edwin Rosario, was not as fortunate as Mike, losing an unpopular 12-round decision to Hector Camacho. Twice the rugged Rosario had Camacho on the verge of a knockout, but couldn't finish the job. As soon as Camacho regained his senses, he got on his bicycle and ran away from his tormentor for the rest of the fight, salvaging his title only through the good graces of the judges, not through any efforts of his own. Mike had only 15 days to bask in the glory of his most recent victory. On June 28th, he entered the RPI field house to trade punches with yet another graduate of the cruiserweight division, William Hosea from Peoria, Illinois. Hosea carried an impressive 17-4 record with 15 knockouts into the ring with him. During his career, Hosea had beaten Mitch Green, KO'd former heavyweight contender Ronaldo Stipes, and had the highly touted Greg Page on the canvas before losing a 10-round decision. One of his claims to fame was the fact that he had never been knocked down in 21 professional fights. Mike, of course, intended to change that statistic. As usual, the kid from Catskill was the aggressor from the opening bell, keeping the pressure on his 29-year-old opponent. As the two fighters exchanged punches in the centre of the ring, Hosea suddenly got in a thunderous left hook that caught Mike right between the eyes. The teenager's head snapped back on impact, but he shook off the blow with no apparent damage. Seconds later, Mike was on the attack, pounding Hosea with both hands. A jolting right uppercut buckled Hosea's knees and spelled the beginning of the end for the Illinois heavyweight. The punches came in flurries now, mostly heavy, sickening shots to the body. The barrage continued for about 15 seconds. Then 1, 2, 3 hooks found the side of Hosea's head, dropping the 205-pounder on his face. Hosea quickly got up on his haunches and made it to one knee, but remained fixed there as the fatal count reached 10. The knockout, coming at 2 minutes and 3 seconds of round 1, culminated a 57-punch demolition and improved Mike's record to a perfect 23-0 with 21 knockouts, including 14 first-round knockouts. Mike said, "I hit him with 2 good body punches and I felt his strength disintegrating and leaving his body. He took a better punch to the head than to the body." Hosea said, "Mike's got a pretty potent punch. I'm sorry the people didn't get the money's worth." Mike's trainer, Kevin Rooney, also added, "He took some shots and could have continued, but the count got to 6, 7 and 8 and he said, 'What the hell?' He knew he couldn't beat him." The Tyson Express was back on track and headed for Titleville. Mike was already ranked number 2 by the World Boxing Council, and he was in a position to demand a title shot any time he chose. His managers chose instead to schedule another 4 to 6 fights before sending their teenage gladiator into the ring against the champion. There was no urgency to challenge for the title. The end of the year would be soon enough. 2 days after the Hosea fight, Mike quietly celebrated his 20th birthday and then slept away to one of the Catskill resorts near Swan Lake to rest and promote his upcoming fight against Lorenzo Boyd. Mike returned home to Catskill after the holidays to prepare for the Boyd fight. The serenity around the year-old hosts were comforting to a young man who had risen to celebrity status almost overnight. As he told the Daily Mail, "I like the peace and quiet of the country, and I like animals. I still have my pigeons, and I've just bought a Shar-Pei. I've always wanted to get a Shar-Pei. The Shar-Pei breed was developed in ancient China to hunt wild boar. It's a mass of wrinkles to look at, a homely little dog, but warm and loving." Mike was anything but warm and loving to his sparring partners in the gym on the Monday morning, though. Dion Burgess and Anthony Davis brought out the best in Mike, and as a result, they took a fearful beating. The Tyson entourage made the 100-mile trek up to Swan Lake the night before the fight. Fight day dawned, hot and humid with the temperature creeping up into the 90s. But it was still more comfortable than it would have been had the fight been held in New York City or Albany. Mike spent a relaxing Friday in the cool environs of the country, communing with nature, enjoying the animals and getting himself mentally prepared for his 24th search and destroy mission. The New York fighter was gunning for another quick knockout against Boyd in order to propel himself into the upper echelon of the heavyweight division. From here on, Mike would fight only contenders as he scrambled towards the top of the heap. Lorenzo Boyd, another Oklahoma cowboy from the same stable as Quick Tillis, sported a solid 17-5 record as a professional, but he was still considered to be just a journeyman fighter by most boxing experts. Boyd sounded confident in his pre-fight comments, but the words had a hollow ring to them. When the fight got underway, Mike immediately assumed the role of the pursuer, and Lorenzo Boyd became the pursued. Boyd fought like a man trying to survive, not like a man who had come to try and defrock a myth. He stood cemented in the centre of the ring, hands held high to protect his face and elbows close to the body as he waited for Mike to start beating on him. Mike didn't disappoint. His first punch of the fight, an awesome right hand to the ribcage, forced all the air out of Boyd's lungs, accompanied by an eerie hissing sound. Boyd recoiled from the blow, grimacing in pain, but before he could recover, an even more damaging punch smashed against his nose, shattering it and sending a shower of blood cascading over both contestants. Mike worked Boyd's body unmercifully during the remainder of the round, maintaining an almost non-stop offence. At one point, Mike narrowly missed scoring with a sizzling uppercut that might well have ended the fight there and then, but it was only a temporary reprieve as far as Lorenzo Boyd was concerned. Round 2 was more of the same. Body punch after body punch found its mark as the relentless and ruthless Mike kept on top of his outgunned foe. He was poetry in motion now, a pugilistic virtuoso who was performing to perfection as 2,300 excited patrons cheered him on. Mike moved in on his man once more, unleashing a lightning left-left combination to the body and head that spun Boyd around. The Predator was in full pursuit, and he closed in for the kill. Another rapid-fire left-left sequence finished the job with the final uppercut, lifting the man from Cushing completely off his feet and depositing him on his back, out cold. Only 1 minute and 33 seconds had elapsed. Lorenzo Boyd never moved as the referee hovered over him and showed him his fingers from 1 to 10. Boyd lay unconscious for a full 5 minutes, his head resting comfortably on the bottom strand of the rope. When he was finally revived, he was propped up on his stool in the centre ring, where the doctor worked him over for another 5 minutes. Boyd looked like a man who had just been run over by a truck. Mike Tyson was now ready for the big time, and the big time was only 15 days away. On July the 26th, Mike, now ranked 8 by the WBC, would climb through the ropes at the Glens Falls Civic Centre to go dukes with the number 11 heavyweight Marvis Fraser before a live audience of 8,000 wild boxing fans, plus thousands more who would be watching on ABC's Wide World of Sports. Mike was entering the final phase of his long climb to the top of the boxing world. The Marvis Fraser fight was intended to be the event that would catapult him into international prominence. No longer would he be a sports figure, known only to those who followed the sweet science of pugilism. Henceforth, if all went as planned, he would be a citizen of the world, known to all and admired by most. It was only fitting that this fight should evolve into a contest of minds rather than a war of clenched fists. Smoking Joe Fraser, Marvis's famous father, initiated the mind game, and when the final hand had been played, he regretted having done so. Joe Fraser always looked for the edge in a boxing match, In this contest, Joe felt that he could destroy Mike's nerves by constantly belittling his talents and achievements. He insulted and embarrassed the Catskill youngster at every opportunity. At press conferences, during TV interviews, even in everyday conversation, Smoking Joe preyed on Mike's inner character. During the 4 weeks preceding the big encounter, Joe Frazier played the matador to Mike Tyson's bull. The boxing world waited to see if the matador could humble his courageous foe, or if the bull would turn on his tormentor and disembowel him. Mike's every move was now being scrutinised by the men of the press, in hopes that a sensational story might surface to tarnish his reputation. Every slight transgression was faithfully blown out of proportion by the vultures of the newsbeat and colourfully reported to an equally cynical public thirsting for scandal. A visit to a Latham pizza joint with a group of friends that became somewhat boisterous as teenage gatherings are supposed to be, well, it became a disturbance according to the local scandal sheets. A day away from the gym was reported as a major training and attitude problem, if you listen to the impartial sports writers, of course. The rumour mill buzzed with the latest Mike tidbits. Mike had an apartment in Albany, and he was a regular participant in the Central Avenue swinging single scene, apparently. Mike was looking for a house in Loudonville. He also had a new girlfriend every week, his latest amour being Cody Carmack. Mike was frequently AWOL from training camp, much to the chagrin of trainer Kevin Rooney. But the truth is that Mike Tyson was neither saint nor sinner. He wasn't perfect, yet neither was he a teenage degenerate, as some of the yellow journalists would have the public believe. He was still just an adolescent, 1 year out of high school. He did miss an occasional day in the gym in order to hang out with his buddies at Crossgates Mall. He did have a lot of girlfriends, and he did have an apartment in Albany close to his favourite hangout. But he was also keeping his nose to the grindstone more than most fighters do, sparring up to 200 times a year. Mike was a professional boxer, and he was dedicated to his profession. Taken in context, Mike was as normal as his friends, and more disciplined than most. Now, in July 1986, Mike and his trainers were working hard, preparing for the Marvis Frazier fight. The newspaper comments by Joe Frazier drove them to work even harder. Mike Tyson's no heavyweight. He's just an overblown middleweight. Mike Tyson hasn't fought anybody, just a bunch of bums. He's got no punch. He's never been in the ring with anyone like Marvis. These were the reports. Mike read the reports, and he seethed at Joe Frazier's audacity. Outwardly, he remained calm and cool, but inside he was an inferno ready to explode. He vowed he would get even with the Frazier family on fight night. Tyson sparred with increased intensity. Joe Frazier continued to spurt venom. Mike Tyson's a baby, and he talks like a girl. Mike read, and he listened. He took his anger out on the body bag and the speed bag. He made his sparring partners pay for Joe Frazier's big mouth. Kevin Rooney observed the mental jousting between the two camps and smiled with satisfaction. He confided to the Daily Mail at the time, Mike Tyson's not a boxer. When the bell rings for round 1, Mike is released. The boxing sessions with Dion Burgess and Anthony Davis were violent and exciting, bringing a round of applause from the local fans who crowded into the Spartan gym to view the future champion. Rooney was impressed with his fighter's progress. He said, "I've sparred him a lot. I know he's in shape. He doesn't have time to get out of shape, and he doesn't have any bad habits. He doesn't drink or do drugs. Plus, his fights are scheduled one on top of the other, and that's the way it should be." The press conference held in Glens Fall on July 25th was typical of the pre-fight build-up. Joe Frazier again did most of the talking. He said, "Marvis will slug it out with him, and he will beat him. It's going to be a rumble. Marvis is a truck. Tyson is only a wheelbarrow. A wheelbarrow that's going to get run over." Again, Mike listened intently, but when his turn to talk came, he was much more subdued than Smoking Joe, although he was quietly confident. He said, "I know what Marvis Frazier has got. I'm sure he's seen what I've got. I'm ready to fight." Cus D'Amato's old friend, hypnotist, Dr. John Halpin, drove up from Manhattan to spend a few minutes with Mike on the day of the fight. Together they talked about Cus's philosophies of positive thinking and mind over matter. It didn't take Dr. Halpin long to realise that Mike needed no special pep talk for this fight. He was well prepared, mentally and physically. Joe Frazier had given the young warrior all the incentive he needed to win this fight, and his approach was positive and aggressive. Across town in another hotel, the Frasers spent the pre-fight hours discussing their fight plan. The preparations for this fight contained more than the average amount of psychological jousting, with Papa Joe Fraser trying to destroy Mike's confidence. Fraser had ranted and raved for weeks leading up to the big event, denouncing the 20-year-old fighter's manhood as well as his boxing ability. He attempted to work Mike into such a frenzy by fight time that the Catskill youngster would forget his fight plan and throw caution to the winds, allowing Marvis to take advantage of his carelessness and control the fight and possibly winning by a knockout. Joe didn't know it at the time, but his strategy had backfired, as no other strategy had ever backfired in the history of professional boxing. He had created in Mike a monster of immense proportions, a monster seething with pent-up fury and hostility, a monster seeking revenge, but a monster who would be fighting intelligently and under control. Joe Fraser had gotten Mike worked up all right, but Mike didn't let it destroy either his fight plan or his concentration. Instead, he channeled his anger into an increased determination and aggressiveness. On July the 26th, spectators began filing in to the arena at noon, although the Tyson-Fraser fight was not scheduled to start until approximately 4:30 p.m. Only 5,102 spectators were willing to travel to Glens Falls and fork out ranging from $30 to $75 to witness the event, leaving over 2,000 seats empty in the Civic Center at fight time. Most boxing enthusiasts in the area had already seen Mike fight on numerous occasions, and for a lot less money than $75. The inability to sell out the auditorium spelt doom for Glens Falls as a site of big money boxing matches. Hereafter it would be considered only for the less popular fight cards, the $12 ringside cards. World-class matches would be held in New York, Atlantic City and Las Vegas. Marvis Fraser entered the ring first, as was customary for Mike's opponents. He looked calm and confident as he went through a preliminary warm-up routine. Minutes later, Mike made his entrance into the auditorium, and the hushed silence in the great building suddenly exploded into a cacophony of noise. The 5,102 fans stood and applauded, screamed, whistled and stamped their feet to welcome their favourite gladiator into the arena. Mike was oblivious to the reception. Gone was the casual, unexpressive look that usually covered his face. In its place was an unsettling sneer, a look that bordered on total hatred. Not only was Mike angry at the Frasers, father and son, but he was also upset at many so-called friends in the Albany area who'd predicted a Fraser victory. So Mike was determined to prove them wrong. Today the world would know how good Mike Tyson really was. Mike stalked around the ring, scowling, anxious to get the proceedings underway. As he stood in his corner staring at Joe, the kid from Catskill mentally vowed to dismember the younger member of the Fraser clan quickly and decisively in round 1. He was determined not to let Smoking Joe's son hear the bell for round 2. The referee, Joe Cortez, kept the fighters separated for almost a minute before round 1, waiting for a cue from the television crew. When at last the fight began, Mike lurched into the centre of the ring like a man chasing a streetcar. Fraser poured at his attacker with a looping left, but Mike slipped it easily. Mike countered with a hard right that only caught Fraser on the arms, but still drove the Philadelphia fighter back several feet. The young New Yorker missed 2 wild punches, but in the process backed Fraser into a neutral corner. 4 jabs from the intense Tyson brought no retaliation as Marvis slid along the ropes to a point midway across the ring. A right cross to the side of the head rocked Fraser, and a follow-up right to the ribcage sent him reeling backwards. Marvis seemed to be intimidated by Mike's awesome power at this point, and he withdrew into a defensive shell. This was exactly what Mike wanted. Without any offensive weapons, Marvis Fraser was a sitting duck. The master of disaster bobbed and weaved while flicking out light jabs, trying to manoeuvre his man into a vulnerable position. Then Marvis made the fatal mistake. He slipped away from Mike and moved back along the ropes into the neutral corner again. Mike stalked his man like a predatory jungle cat. 3 more Tyson jabs backed Fraser deeper into the corner, so his back was now touching the padded ring post. The cat had played with the mouse long enough. He was ready for the kill. 1 more left jab occupied Fraser's attention, then a quick right uppercut buckled his knees. As he straightened up, another uppercut crashed against his unprotected chin, almost decapitating him. With the second devastating punch, the muscle tone completely disappeared from Fraser's neck. His head, now without any muscles to support it, lurched upwards and backwards grotesquely. His vacant eyes stared out into nothingness. As he bounced off the ropes and pitched forward, his head hung helplessly in front of his limp body, beckoning to Tyson like a seductive speed bag. The Catskill assassin responded with 2 more crushing punches, a right cross and a left hook that had Fraser's head bouncing back and forth like a yo-yo. He collapsed sideways into the ropes and slid helplessly into a sitting position against the ring post. Referee Joe Cortez stepped in immediately and waved Mike to a neutral corner. He got down on one knee next to the fallen Fraser and picked up the count, but all 5, seeing no response from Marvis and fearing for his safety, he waved the fight over. Then, with fatherly affection, Cortez reached under Fraser's right arm to support him and gently removed his mouthpiece. The carnage had lasted only 30 seconds. Mike was in the forefront of those who rushed to the side of the stricken fighter, but Matt Baranski and Kevin Rooney pulled their charge back across the ring. As he knew he was being led away, a worried Mike looked back over his shoulder and pleaded with Marvis's father, "Please go check on him. I'm sorry it happened like this." Once back in the corner, Mike, still concerned for the well-being of his opponent, ran to the ropes and yelled down to one of the attending physicians, "Get in here, quick!" But Dr. Jock Ford, another physician, was already leaping through the ropes, yelling, "Don't move him! His neck may be broken!" Ford, who had witnessed a savage attack close up, feared that Fraser might have suffered a serious neck injury from the ferocity of Mike's blows. Later, Mike would remark, "I didn't want to hurt him because I wouldn't want to get hurt myself." As Mike's thoughts drifted from Fraser's condition to the fight itself, he remembered once again Joe Fraser's vitriolic comments and the predictions of his Albany detractors. His face darkened and the look of anger and hatred returned. The arena was sheer bedlam now, brought on by the terrifying destruction of the world's 11th heavyweight boxer, and the young D'Amato protege got caught up in the electricity of the moment. Sneering with disdain, he stared out at the cheering crowd and almost spit the words at them. "I'm from Catskill, New York, and I'm the best fighter in the world." Joe Fraser's strategy lay in a bloody heap in a neutral corner. This fight was a warning to all future Tyson opponents. Don't get Mike angry. It turns him into a wild animal. As he himself had said only weeks before, there are a lot of things you can do to Mike Tyson, but you can't intimidate him. Marvis Fraser was still trying to clear the cobwebs from his head an hour after he's counted out. The last thing he remembered was backing into a neutral corner. He said, "I wanted to see what Mike had. I guess I found out too late." When asked what he would do differently next time, Fraser sagely remarked, "I wouldn't get hit with that uppercut." Mike's first test as a contender was an unqualified success. As Cus D'Amato once remarked, when he hits them, they go down. Trainer Kevin Rooney updated D'Amato's comments by adding, "He's ready to fight anybody in the world." Mike was now a premier drawing card in the division. In fact, in the entire sport of boxing. Offers poured into Big Fights Inc. from all sectors of the boxing world and were carefully scrutinised by Messrs. Caton and Jacobs. Bob Arum wanted to arrange a match between Mike Tyson and Jerry Cooney, which he referred to as the fight of the century, a $50 million extravaganza. The Larry Holmes camp expressed an interest in a contest between their man and Mike Tyson that would determine the real heavyweight champion of the world. Bob Gutkowski, president of Madison Square Garden Boxing, proposed a closed-circuit event and offered Mike $500,000 to meet the former title holder. HBO Sports and Dynamic Duo Productions wooed the Tyson Group to join the HBO Unification Series by challenging Trevor Berbick for the WBC heavyweight title in October. Caton and Jacobs promised a decision by the end of August, following a scheduled match with Jose Ribalta in Atlantic City on August 17th. Mike took a brief holiday following the Fraser fight, but it was a working vacation. He spent a week away from the gym, but he did make a series of personal appearances in New York City before beginning his training. One morning, Mike did an anti-drug television commercial for the FBI. In the afternoon, he visited Shea Stadium for a publicity session with several members of the New York Mets. The photographer captured several light moments of Tyson clowning with Dwight Gooden and Darryl Strawberry. Tyson autographed several sets of boxing gloves during his visit, including one pair for the third baseman Ray Knight. "From one slugger to another," it read. Later in the week, Mike occupied a front row at Yankee Stadium where he chatted with Dave Winfield and Ricky Henderson. His Yankees buddies presented him with 6 autographed bats for his trophy room. The closer Mike got to the heavyweight championship, the more intense the pressure became, and the more demands were made on his time. His life was no longer just training and fighting. As celebrity grew, more of his time had to be allocated to promotions, TV commercials, public appearances and community relations. These commitments came at the expense of his training time. Solitude would be hard to come by for Mike for many months. Fortunately for the young boxer, Cus D'Amato had anticipated this eventuality several years before and had worked hard to prepare his young charge for this day. Mike was trying to prepare himself for stardom. Now, while Mike's people weighed all the offers and pondered the various alternatives, trying to predict which strategy would have the best long-term financial benefits for their fighter, another young boxer was attempting to thrust himself back into the title chase. Tyrell Biggs' career had more ups and downs than proverbial roller coaster as he travelled the treacherous road from amateur sensation to professional contender. Along the way, the former Olympic gold medal winner achieved numerous victories, with almost as many of them occurring outside the ring as inside. As Biggs' amateur reputation grew, he gradually fell in with a bad crowd. Wild parties, fast girls, booze and drugs quickly followed, and before long, Tyrell Biggs was hooked on cocaine. By the time he defeated Italian super heavyweight champion Francesco Damiani in the Olympic finals in Los Angeles, the Philadelphia boxer was freebasing the deadly white powder. His pro career ended suddenly after only one fight. Now, Tyrell was clean and healthy, and his sights were set on a title match before the end of the year. His first step along the path to a championship ended impressively on August the 14th as he knocked out Rod Smith in round 6 of a scheduled 10-rounder. The Tyson camp was talking about possible fights against Holmes, Spinks, Berbick and Jerry Cooney, but they also kept a wary eye on the big man from the city of brotherly love. Tyrell Biggs was immensely talented and clever, and now he was also hungry. After a week and a half of light duty, Mike was sent back to the musty old gymnasium on Main Street to sharpen his skills for the next challenge. Dion Burgess was on hand to hone Mike's rings reflexes, and this time he was joined by former Tyson opponent, Irish Mike Jameson, and Hawaiian heavyweight named Enoch. Mike's heart wasn't in training for the Ribalta fight. He was still decompressing from the spectacular win over the Fraser boys, Marvis and Joe. That was unfortunate because 1,500 miles away in Miami Beach, a sinuous 6'5" Cuban heavyweight named Jose Ribalta was working out feverishly in preparation for his big opportunity. The rangy Ribalta jogged 5 miles a day in the sands of sunny Florida, beginning his run in the early morning darkness and finishing it as the sun was just breaking through the shimmering blue waters of the Atlantic Ocean. Midday found the dedicated boxer at the gaily decorated Boxing of America's gym, where manager Lou DeCubas drove him unmercifully through his conditioning program. Both men were determined that Nino would be in the best condition of his life for this fight. If Ribalta lost to Mike, it would not be for lack of training, it would be because Mike was the better fighter. As the final countdown to fight day began, Kevin Rooney was on the verge of a nervous breakdown. He couldn't seem to establish a regular training routine for his fighter. On Tuesday, August 12th, a small group of locals positioned themselves on and around the small stage in the Cus D'Amato gym to view Mike's 12:30 sparring session. Jameson and Enoch were well warmed up as they shadow boxed in the ring, awaiting the arrival of Mike. As the minutes ticked off the clock, Laurie Hoey, manager of the Paloki's Motel, home base for Tyson's sparring partners, whispered to the author, "Sometimes he doesn't show up." Another spectator came to Tyson's defence. "He's a good kid." Finally, at 1:10 p.m, the telephone rang, and Rooney grabbed the receiver like an expectant father. Within seconds, the trainer returned and announced disgustingly to the audience, "Mike isn't going to spar today. He's under the weather." Laurie Hoey just smiled. He has his moods. He never smiles in the gym unless someone does something stupid. Mike was handling his meteoric rise to the top of the boxing world as well as could be expected, but he was, after all, only 20 years old and still a kid. Occasionally, the constant pressure and demands on his time, 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, it got to him and he rebelled. But the rebellions were fleeting and they had little effect on the performance of the boy who ate, slept and breathed boxing 12 months a year. When he failed to spar again on Wednesday, Kevin Rooney was outwardly distressed. He said, "The fight may be called off. Mike has an intestinal infection and he may not be better till Monday. We still have to go to Atlantic City and have Mike checked by the doctors. They might give him a medical discharge." On Friday, 2 days before the fight, Rooney, Mike and the cornermen made the 200-mile trek to Atlantic City in their new customised van. Mike was still not fully recovered from the flu, but he passed the physical and the fight went on as scheduled. Jose Ribalta completed his training sessions on Friday and was pronounced ready to go. Ribalta was ranked number 8 by the WBA and had been in with some of the top talent in the division. In spite of 2 tough losses in 1986, a 10-round split decision to both Bone Crusher Smith and Marvis Fraser, his record still stood at a strong 23-1. Although Mike's training schedule was severely limited, trainer Kevin Rooney was confident about the outcome of the battle when he said, "Ribalta is an awkward fighter, but I don't think he'll last long against Mike. Michael will work his body until he sees an opening. Then he'll knock Ribalta out." Sunday night, a capacity crowd filled the Trump Plaza Hotel and Casino to see if the New York youngster could add the clever Ribalta to his growing list of knockout victims. Most people were hoping for another Tyson massacre. At ringside, the HBO broadcasting team of Barry Tompkins, Larry Merchant and Sugar Ray Leonard, decked out in formal black tuxedos, were busy preparing themselves for the main event. Mike's appearance in the ring supported the contention that he had been ill during the preceding week. He came in at only 213.5 pounds, 4 pounds below his normal fighting weight and his lightest weight as a professional. His features were gaunt and drawn, still he managed to get in a good warm-up session in the dressing room, as attested to by the heavy blanket of perspiration that covered his body. He entered the ring with his usual menacing sneer. Referee Rudy Battle, one of the few black referees in the sport, beckoned the fighters to the centre of the ring. During the introductions, the 6'6" Ribalta towered over the stocky Tyson, causing one wag to compare them to the comic strip characters Mutt and Jeff. Another spectator marvelled over the big height and reach advantage enjoyed by the Cuban heavyweight, whereby an annoyed Mike backer retorted, "Don't give me height and reach, give me a guy that can fight." When the bell rang, Mike was prepared to show everyone that he could fight. He was in the centre of the ring in a flash, raining rights and lefts on the surprised opponent. Before the end of the round, a Tyson uppercut straightened Ribalta up like a tree. Still, Kevin Rooney was not happy with his charge's performance. Between rounds, he instructed the Catskill youngster, "Looks like you're a little lazy. You need to turn up the intensity. You understand?" Mike understood. Coming out in round 2, still the aggressor. Both fighters threw punches with bad intentions. Ribalta's stiff left jabs annoyed the pressing Mike, who nonetheless forced his way to the inside to work the body. Midway through the round, Mike executed a perfect 8-2, a sharp right hook to the ribcage followed by a rapid-fire right uppercut that knocked Ribalta on the seat of his pants. Although the punch was devastating, Ribalta's expressions was one of shock rather than of pain. He had never before witnessed such hand speed from a heavyweight. He became more respectful of Mike's power after the knockdown. There was still 55 seconds left in round 2, but Jose Ribalta was still fresh and not ready to be taken. A heated exchange ensued as both fighters unloaded their Sunday punches. Mike landed a hard left to the chin at the bell. As the fight progressed, the lanky Cuban used a stiff jab to keep Mike at arm's length, occasionally stopping to bang with the New Yorker in short but torrid flurries. Whenever Mike was able to work his way inside, Ribalta tied him up. The Catskill fighter appeared to get frustrated by these manoeuvres and began headhunting. He did fight with extreme intensity during the first 3 rounds, however repeatedly scoring with tremendous body shots. The pace slowed noticeably during the middle rounds, causing an annoyed Kevin Rooney to chastise his fighter. He said, "Michael, you're stinking up the joint. You're not throwing combinations, you're only throwing one punch at a time, and you're not throwing them with bad intentions." Mike was obviously not fully recovered from his intestinal infection. His mind was willing, but his flesh was too weak to give an all-out effort for a full 3 minutes each round. In spite of the heated activity of the first 5 rounds, Mike's body was barely wet, indicating that the young fighter had been dehydrated by his illness. In round 6, a Ribalta jab bloodied Mike's nose, the first time in his career that Mike had bled. In the 7th round, Mike unloaded a big right hand to Ribalta's cheekbone with 33 seconds left, snapping the big guy's head back and spewing perspiration all over the front row spectators. The crowd showed its appreciation for Ribalta's courageous effort by chanting "Jose, Jose, Jose" as the round 8 began. Mike wasn't impressed, and he answered the crowd's chants with a flurry of punches to Ribalta's body. A hard right hook found the Cuban's head with 1 minute gone, sending his mouthpiece out of the ring. Another right hook knocked a bridge out of Ribalta's mouth. The Catskill assassin, sensing an opportunity to end the fight, calmly stalked his man. Another stiff right sent the big Cuban careering off the ropes. Again, Mike was on top of him, and again he hurt the Miami fighter, this time with a crunching right uppercut that turned Ribalta's legs to jelly. The big heavyweight was taking a lot of punishment at this stage, and his only defence was to try and tie Mike up whenever the New Yorker got within arm's reach, but that didn't happen nearly often enough. A long left hand crashed into Ribalta's head with 30 seconds left in the round, dropping him onto the lowest strand of the ropes in a neutral corner. Referee Rudy Battle gave the belligerent Cuban a much-needed standing 8 count. Mike was back. He had overcome his earlier fatigue and the adrenaline was flowing once again. Unfortunately, his physical condition wouldn't allow the number 2 contender to sustain the pace indefinitely, and round 9 was a lethargic affair. Mike waited for his man in the middle of the ring as the round started. A big looping left hand staggered Ribalta, who leaned against his adversary. Mike had an opportunity to put his man away now, but he got over-anxious and let the Cuban off the hook. In round 10, both fighters came out determined to destroy their opponent. They stood toe-to-toe in the centre of the ring for several seconds, flailing away with both hands in a lively exchange. Mike came back with a right from left field that caught Ribalta on the nose, dropping him on his back. The gallant Cuban, hurt but still defiant, struggled to his feet at the count of 3 and waited as Rudy Battle told the mandatory 8 count. The referee stared at Ribalta's glassy eyes. "How you doing? You want to continue?" He replied, "Yeah, hell yeah." As soon as the battle recommenced, the pride of Catskill pushed his big adversary to the ropes and unleashed 5 solid shots to the head. That was all Battle needed. He stepped in between the 2 fighters and ended the punishment at 1 minute and 34 seconds of round 10. Mike by TKO. As Mike paced back and forth in his corner trying to relax, he caught sight of Jim Jacobs and rolled his eyes in a sign of relief, whispering an almost audible "phew" at the same time. It was not one of Mike's greatest fights, but under the circumstances, with the debilitating effects of his illness and the resultant sparse training he had endured in preparation for the event, it was certainly an acceptable performance. At best, Ribalta won 1 round, and as Mike noted himself, he was discouraged and he was desperate. He was scared. Every time he threw punches, his head stayed in the middle, and I wanted to take it off. But he took them, and he brought the best out of me. Mike's strategy committee was not long in announcing the Master of Disaster's plans. On Thursday, August 21st, Big Fights Inc., Dynamic Duo Productions, and HBO Sports called a press conference to make the long-awaited announcement. Mike would enter the HBO Unification series immediately and would challenge Trevor Berbick for the WBC title in November. First, however, the Catskill boxer would honour his commitment to fight Alfonso Ratliff in Las Vegas on September 6 on the undercard of the Michael Spinks and Stefan Tankstead IBF Championship match. At a glance, Alfonso Ratliff did not appear to belong in the same ring with Mike. Ratliff, the former WBC Cruiserweight champion, was a talented boxer in his weight class, but the Catskill sensation was a talented fighter in the heavyweight division, and he outweighed the challenger by 20 pounds. Mike's opponents usually attempted to bolster their own confidence by downplaying Mike Tyson's previous adversaries, and, in some cases, his skills in the ring. Alfonso Ratliff of Chicago was no exception. At an early press conference, Ratliff, gaily bedecked in a dark suit with a pink open-neck shirt, remarked, "His opponents have all been little fat Pillsbury doughboys, fat and flabby around the middle. Most of them look like they would fall over without ever taking a punch." Mike listened with amused interest as the native of the Windy City produced his own irritating breeze. Ratliff's tirades didn't impress the Las Vegas oddmakers, however. Mike was installed as a 28-1 favourite to win the fight, As a matter of fact, it was impossible to place a bet on the winner of the fight. The only bets that were being accepted were on whether or not Ratliff would last longer than 5 rounds. On Thursday, September the 4th, another press conference was held, this one in the press room of the Hilton Hotel in Las Vegas, the site of the fight. Although the Tyson-Ratliff match was on the undercard of the Spinks-Tangstad fight, it was being treated by the media as the main event. Mike, the man who had brought excitement back to the heavyweight ranks, was the focus of attention around town. The conference room was jammed with newspaper and television reporters as Iron Mike, his new media moniker, and Windy City Al faced off verbally for the last time. Ratliff, cool in a baseball cap, was still trying to talk himself into the fight. Tyson says he'll take me out in 5. Well, I'll take him out in 6. If he beats me, I'll quit boxing. I'm not going to stand toe-to-toe with him. When he's throwing those wild punches, I'll be sticking and moving. Mike Tyson said in response, if there's any knockdowns, I'll be the one making them. Michael Spinks, the IBF king, was well aware of Mike's capabilities, as he was kinder to the kid from New York than Ratliff was. He said, he's dangerous, big, rugged and awesome. He's another guy for me to be afraid of and to worry about. Michael Spinks knew that somewhere down the road, he and Mike would square off in the ring, and he wasn't looking forward to it. Tyson's 20-pound weight advantage held up at the weigh-in as he tipped the scales at 221.5 pounds to 201 pounds for the 30-year-old cruiserweight. Even though Ratliff had a record of 21-3 with 16 KOs, most of his victories were against cruiserweights. His occasional forays in the heavier weight class had ended in disaster. Knockouts at the hands of Tim Witherspoon in 7 rounds and Pinklon Thomas in 10 rounds. Mike hoped to improve on those performances, hence the 5-round betting limitations. Saturday found young Mike ready and waiting. Alfonso Ratliff, however, seemed to leave his bravado in the dressing room. Like so many of Mike's opponents, Ratliff talked a good game, but when the chips were down, he wilted under the Tyson mystique. He was intimidated by Iron Mike's awesome record of mayhem and mutilation in the ring, and his pre-fight courage was replaced by fear as he slipped through the ring ropes to face his destiny. Both fighters came out on the balls of their feet, and Mike was the aggressor, as everyone expected him to be, and Alfonso Ratliff was the runner, constantly backing away and circling the ring to keep the young slugger at long range. Mike advanced on his man, gloves held high against his cheekbones in the time-honoured peekaboo style developed by Cus D'Amato and used to maximum advantage by Floyd Patterson and Jose Torres. Mike stalked his man, but was unable to work his way inside or trap him on the ropes. At the 1 minute and 11 mark, Ratliff changed direction from counterclockwise to clockwise and was met immediately with a stinging right hand to the chin. The kid from Catskill tried to follow up his advantage, but the tall, lanky Ratliff tied him up. 2 Tyson jabs held Ratliff immobilised on the ropes, and a left-right combination dropped the overmatched Chicago fighter to 1 knee. Referee Davy Pearl inexplicably called it a slip. Ratliff scrambled to his feet and got back on his bicycle, content just to survive the round. The round ended without further action, and Tyson returned to his corner in obvious disgust at his opponent's antics. If Mike had his choice, the 2 fighters would stand toe-to-toe in the centre of the ring, banging away at each other until one of them dropped. Trainer Kevin Rooney implored his fighter to go back to basics. He said, work the body and cut the ring down, you understand? You've got him scared, now don't let him get brave. Punch in combinations and then cut it down. Cut it down the right way. Cut the angles down quick. Ratliff's corner was pleased with the fighter's imitation of Fred Astaire. That's it, you're doing good. Now, combinations, and don't stay still. Move around and punch in combinations this time. Ratliff disregarded his corner's instructions and moved in closer at the start of round 2, intending to trade punches with Mike more often. Of course, that was a big mistake. After about 3 seconds, Mike set his man up with a flicking left jab, then bobbed and weaved under a Ratliff right and countered with a short, chopping left to the side of Ratliff's head that sent the former cruiserweight champion sprawling over the bottom strand of the ropes. Mike watched in disbelief as Ratliff dragged himself to his feet at the count of 9, intent on continuing the battle. The kid from Catskill was on his injured prey like a buzzsaw, unleashing a fusillade of punches to Ratliff's body and the head. The Chicago fighter was wobbly, but finally managed to tie his man up. As soon as the referee separated the 2 fighters, Mike manoeuvred his outgunned opponent back to the ropes again. A devastating right hook turned Ratliff's legs rubbery, and he sagged against the ropes. Another flurry of punches ended with a jolting left to the side of the head that dropped Ratliff to his hands and knees. The fight ended without a count as referee David Pearl waved an end to the slaughter at 1 minute and 41 seconds of round 2. Again, a concerned Mike was one of the first to approach his vanquished foe, putting both hands behind Ratliff's neck and whispering some words of consolation in his ears. The sneer disappeared from Tyson's face as soon as the fight ended, and the boy was a boy again, loose and jovial as Kevin Rooney cut the tape from his hands. It was a good fight for Mike. It was another valuable lesson in ring generalship. The young contender fought a tall, rangy boxer who tried to run, and he cornered the man and destroyed him. Before his career was over, a lot of fighters would try and run and hide on Mike, and it was imperative that he became proficient at cutting the ring down and trapping his man on the ropes. The Ratliff fight provided another learning experience for Mike, and he showed continued progress in this trade. Watching the 20-year-old kid solve the Ratliff puzzle brought to mind once again the words of the immortal Joe Louis. He can run, but he can't hide. The kid from Catskill added a few words of his own. He said, "Running doesn't work at all, because they can't win the fight by running. I keep the pressure on them, and the more they run, the more I throw punches, so I'm ahead either way." Mike then donned the earphones and joined Sugar Ray Leonard and Barry Tompkins at ringside before the Spinks fight. The Catskill sensation was very relaxed and at ease. The maturing process appeared to have reached completion as Mike learned how to handle his newfound celebrity with grace and patience. The victory against Ratliff moved Mike into the title match with the WBC champion Trevor Berbick. The fight, already booked, was scheduled for the Las Vegas Hilton on November 22nd. At the press conference to present the upcoming Berbick-Tyson confrontation, champion Trevor Berbick was already having reservations about tangling with the young Adonis, and the fight was still 11 weeks away. He said, "This guy is like a tank. This guy's a young, strong monster. I don't know if I want to be in the ring with him longer than 12 rounds. Mike wasn't around to hear the tribute paid to him by the champ. The number one challenger had already departed Las Vegas for a well-earned 3-week vacation. On October the 1st, Mike would resume training for the big fight. Until then, he would just relax, enjoy life, and do a little promotional work for Big Fight Inc. As Trevor Berbick vacillated and Mike relaxed, controversy raised its ugly head in the heavyweight unification series. The dispute was triggered by none other than Bob Arum, the controversial promoter who was left out in the cold in this series. Desperately trying to get a piece of the lucrative heavyweight action, Arum declared that Trevor Berbick was not committed to putting his WBC title on the line against Mike Tyson. According to the crafty Arum, Berbick's contract with Don King and HBO was a promotional contract only, and he did not require a defence of his title against the Catskill Strongboy. The wily one courted the Canadian title holder for weeks, promising him $3 million to meet Jerry Cooney for the WBC crown in December. Berbick, obviously confused and flattered by all the attention, declared his November contract with Don King to be invalid and said he would sign to fight Cooney for Top Rank Inc. It didn't take the HBO group long to respond to the attempted coup by Arum. Don King, Carl King, Butch Lewis and the Hilton Hotel officials all attacked Arum publicly, insisting that Trevor Berbick was committed to defending his crown against Mike in November and would honour his contract. Don King and the Hilton people vowed to take Berbick and Arum to court if necessary. The Hilton chain had reportedly spent over $10 million on the 4-bout HBO series and was ready to do battle to protect its interests. Don King was quoted as saying, "A rival promoter has stooped to an all-time low. Berbick has a contract and it is registered with the WBC and its president, Jose Suleiman. Trevor has been given $125,000 expressly for the Mike Tyson fight." Once the King boys, father and son, got to Berbick, he wilted under the combined pressure and agreed to honour his contract. A press conference announcing the date was quickly scheduled for the following day, September 9th. Trevor Berbick capitulated publicly, to the relief of all parties associated with the tournament. After being threatened by Jose Suleiman with having his title taken away, the Jamaican-born heavyweight returned to the fold, hat in hand. Don King helped to make Berbick's decision easier by sweetening the pot for the title fight, upping Berbick's end of the take from $1.6 million to $2.1 million. As the splashy New York City press conference, Don King, the John Barrymore of the squared ring, proudly pronounced Judgment Day, to John Q. Public, and the hype was on. Natalie attired in a black tuxedo, hair in a straight-up electrified style. That was his image. The effervescent promoter titillated the crowd of media people jammed into the ballroom of the Waldorf Astoria with a prediction that Berbick Tyson would be the fight of the decade. He said, "Mike Tyson is the hottest thing in boxing in a long time." Berbick's manager Carl King said, "He's knocking guys out left and right, and that's what the people want to see." Berbick, always wanted to verbalise a victory for himself, actually downplayed Mike's talents. He said, "I'm the best fighter in the world today. Tyson is a good fighter, but he's going to get a boxing lesson. Not only am I going to knock him out, but I'm going to give him a good whooping. If he comes at me like he's been going after all these other guys, it will end early. This is going to be a tune-up fight and nothing more." The soft-spoken Mike was more modest when he said, "This is the biggest opportunity of my life. I've been training for 8 years with this fight in mind. My managers feel I belong here. I feel I belong here." Once the hoopla had died down, Mike and Kevin Rooney could concentrate on the real business at hand, to get Iron Mike in the best condition of his short career, both physically and mentally. Mike had 44 amateur fights and 27 professional fights. Now his lifelong quest was down to a single fight, a battle for the championship of the world and an opportunity to make a profit out of his late manager Cus D'Amato. A victory over Berbick would fulfill D'Amato's prediction that Mike would become the youngest heavyweight champion in history. The Catskill youngster was determined not to let the opportunity slip away. He would dedicate his fight to his beloved mentor. Out in Las Vegas, the Hilton people were hard at work preparing the physical facilities for the final 3 bouts in the Unification Series. The Berbick-Tyson fight would necessarily have to be fought indoors in the hotel pavilion, with its seating capacity increased to 9,000. By the time the WBC-WBA title fight was held, however, a new outdoor arena would be held in general operation. The arena being constructed in the parking lot of the hotel would seat more than 15,000 spectators. Mike's preparations began with one thought in mind: winning the championship of the world. Becoming a world champion is like breaking the 4-minute mile, achieving a perfect score of 10 in Olympic gymnastics competition, or breaking Babe Ruth's single-season home run record. On the surface, it appears to be impossible, but it isn't impossible. Athletes with adequate skill and superior dedication appear on the sports scene from time to time and achieve the impossible. They succeed where others fail because they believe in themselves and they believe in the quest. Mike believed he would be the heavyweight champion of the world someday. He believed it with all his heart, and he was willing to work hard in order to prove it. He dedicated himself to one objective: to be the best. Cus D'Amato had instilled many valuable qualities in his young protege. One of the most important was a positive attitude. Mike never thought in terms of losing. He firmly believed he could never lose. One day a reporter asked him, "What if you lose?" Mike looked at the man incredulously and replied, "I can't relate to that. I never think in terms of losing. Besides, that's a negative question, and I'm not a negative person. I don't see me losing." Outside the ring, Mike's life was good. He had money, friends, girlfriends, and a host of admirers. Although Mike still maintained his primary residence at the Ewald House, he began to gravitate more and more towards Albany, where he had a host of buddies and where the after-dark activities were exciting. One of the first things Mike did after the Ratliff fight was to get an apartment on Clifton Avenue in Albany, near his friends and close to the action along Central Avenue. Mike was a local celebrity, and hangouts like September's, one of the city's more popular dancing bars, attracted him like a moth to a flame. According to his Albany roommate and close friend, Rory Holloway, Mike was also on the market to purchase a house in Loudonville, a suburb of the state capital. Mike enjoyed the night scene. He related well to the people and loved spending time with people his own age, people that he could swap stories with and exchange jokes with, people on the same emotional and chronological plane. Mike also loved dancing and the camaraderie that pervaded in the late evening atmosphere along Central Avenue. Saturday afternoon often found the Catskill sensation at the Crossgates Mall with his hometown cronies, hanging out and watching the girls. It was just like the old days. Hardly anything had changed outwardly in the last 2 years, except for the heavy gold chains and the diamond-studded gold bracelets. Mike was still the enthusiastic high school kid. As usual, the gang cruised the town in the early evening hours, visiting some of their old haunts at the Latham Circle Mall, as well as the Crossgates. The routine might include a pizza at Papagino's before catching a flick at the cinema. Then it was on to September's and an evening of light-hearted conversation and dancing. As the 1st of October rolled around, it was goodbye to the Central Avenue strip and hello to the gym for Mike. The young challenger had 8 weeks to work off the excesses of a 3-week journey into dissipation and prepare himself to meet the champ. But at 20 years old, that wasn't a difficult task. Conditioning is relatively easy at that age. It is the 30-year-old boxers that have a problem working themselves into shape after an extended layoff. Trainer Kevin Rooney welcomed his fighter back to training camp with open arms, telling the Albany Times-Union, "I'm not going to ask him what he did on his time off. He needed a break from everybody. The 3 weeks off rejuvenated him. All I know is he's alive and he's back in training." The Cus D'Amato gym was bustling with activity for the first time in 3 months as the Tyson quest resumed. The first week was restricted to light workouts of about an hour duration to get Mike loosened up. As week 2 began, the training schedule became more rigorous, with a full slate of sparring sessions in addition to the usual gymnasium regime. Mike's ring opponents, those men that were designated to get him in top condition to battle Trevor Berbick, were Big Mike Jameson and Walter Santamore. Kevin Rooney was happy with that selection. He said, "Jameson has been here before and he's a tough guy. We saw Santamore out in Vegas and he wants to work with us. He's been with Cooney and Holmes. From now on, we'll go from Monday to Saturday and give him Sundays off. We're just trying to get him back in shape." Kevin Rooney might also have noted that Santamore, although his professional record was only a so-so 22-15, had actually been in the ring with some of the biggest names in the division. Men like John Tate, Mitch Green, James Broad, James Tillis, Ernie Shavers, Frank Bruno, Tony Tucker and Trevor Berbick. Almost a who's who of the top 20. Mike, with the glitter of Las Vegas and the constant media harassment waiting to transform him into a screaming schizophrenic as soon as he set foot on Nevada soil, he tried to maintain his equilibrium. He said, "I feel alright. I don't get too excited. It will hit me when I get out to Las Vegas. I'm not going to let myself get bothered with all the hype. I'm just going to concentrate on my home life and my training." Controversy, confusion and confrontation continued to be the order of the day for the Unification Series, even as Mike squared off against Mike Jameson in the ring on the 3rd floor of the Village building in the tiny hamlet of Catskill in upstate New York. Butch Lewis continued his threats to pull Michael Spinks out of the HBO series. Lewis, who was promoting the series with Don King under the banner of Dynamic Duo Productions, called on the WBA to sever its ties with South Africa and to publicly denounce its policy of apartheid. He said, "If the WBA doesn't respond, Spinks will not fight in the series. I refuse to sell my soul for $1, screamed the histrionic Lewis, knowing full well that the WBA would not yield to his threats. After 2 weeks of training in Catskill, it became obvious to Kevin Rooney that a change of scenery was in order. Originally, the Tyson Group was scheduled to move its base of operations out to Las Vegas on October 28th, but Rooney moved it up to the 19th in order to escape the hometown distractions. The crowd of locals that crammed into the tiny gym to watch their hero in action impeded Mike Tyson's progress and prevented Mike from achieving complete concentration, something that was critical to his success. In addition, the magnetism of the Albany scene and the attraction of one particular female friend resulted in several episodes where Mike was AWOL from camp completely. As a matter of fact, during the 2nd week of October, Mike was away from the gym for 6 straight days. Kevin Rooney tried to gloss it over. He said, "He looked so good working in the gym that I gave him a few days off. Then he got tied up in New York with business deals with the managers. They're working on $1 million promotional deal with several large companies." That excuse didn't wash, however, and Mike Tyson packed his bags and headed west. According to the trainer, he said, "We're ready. We're leaving early to set up camp and get situated. We want to get out there and get used to the climate, plus get away from any distractions. We'll have 5 weeks to get ready and get him in shape." As Mike departed Catskill, he made the first prediction of his life. "I'm fighting for the title. This is it. I'm ready. He'll go in the 6th. Kevin Rooney was even more confident. "We're going for an early knockout, maybe even the 1st round. Apparently, the Las Vegas bookmakers agreed with Mike and Kevin's assessments, installing the challenger as an early 4-1 betting favourite to dethrone the Canadian champion. Mike was lodged in a private residence a couple of miles outside of town to give him the maximum amount of privacy. The house, owned by Dr. Bruce Handelman, a friend of Jim Jacobs, was put at his disposal for as long as he remained in the area. Training camp was set up at Johnny Tocco's gym about a mile from the house, and the doors were barred to keep the public out. Even the press was excluded from witnessing the workouts. Tyson and Berbick both trained at Johnny Tocco's, with Mike using the gym at 12:30 daily and Berbick's entourage arriving at 4:30. Both camps insisted on utmost secrecy, so all the windows were covered and iron bars secured the doors. 2 new sparring partners were added to the Tyson training camp in Las Vegas. Mike's old friend and top 10 contender James Broad and young up-and-coming heavyweight sensation Mike Williams. There were even rumours that the hard-punching Williams had put Mike on the seat of his pants during one workout, but trainer Kevin Rooney discounted that story as being a figment of someone's imagination. Although the Tyson camp maintained a Spartan atmosphere in Las Vegas, Mike's newfound celebrity status still required him meeting certain commitments to enhance his public image and promote the fight. In early November, for instance, Mike appeared on the Joan Rivers show in LA for a few minutes of verbal jousting with the syndicated talk show hostess. Strangely enough, Mike got no worse than a draw with the sharp-witted Rivers. During one exchange, the blonde comedian asked Mike why he wore so much gold jewellery. Without blinking an eye, the young fighter, who was weighted down with a heavy gold necklace and an enormous gold and diamond-studded bracelet, deftly replied, "I'm a Catholic." Later, in answer to a question about his out-of-the-ring hobbies, Mike gave them as ice cream and women, in that order. While in LA, Mike also attended a press conference at the Beverly Hilton Hotel to promote the upcoming fight. A 5-1 favourite, the challenger exuded confidence when he stated, "I'm a man and I'm ready to fight for the man's crown." Trevor Berbick, the 32-year-old champion from Jamaica, had his own ideas about the outcome of the fight. He said, "No question, it's going to be a knockout, and I'll be standing at the end." Poor Berbick was rapidly getting himself into a macho state of mind, a condition that would prove his undoing on Judgment Day. The proud champion was talking tough in order to psych out his young opponent, but the more he talked, the more he believed his own rhetoric. As the days passed, Berbick became determined to prove his manhood in the ring by standing toe-to-toe with a 20-year-old slugger and exchanging full firepower with him. Trevor Berbick intended to show the world that he could take anything that Mike could throw and then go on the offensive himself and bring the kid from Catskill to his knees. That was Berbick's plan. It wasn't a very good plan. As soon as the Los Angeles schedule was complete, Mike and Kevin Rooney flew back to Las Vegas to resume workouts. Mike rose bright and early, his first day back in the desert, and stepped out into the Vegas darkness for his usual 5-mile run through the outskirts of town. It was 5 a.m, and Mike had the streets to himself. After a leisurely morning agenda and a light lunch, Mike and Kevin Rooney drove to Johnny Tocco's gym for the day's training session. The focal points of the workouts were ring wars, 2 rounds each with Jameson, Santimore, Broad and Williams. As Rooney reminded everyone, Mike's sparring sessions were not run-of-the-mill workouts. They were real matches, with no holds barred. He said, "I always make it a point to say to the sparring partners, I want you to go out there and do the best you can. I don't want you to go out there and hold back. My man is here to fight. My man is going to go hard." Mike then nodded in agreement and he said, "I train like a fight. If someone comes to spar with me and they're not serious, I think they're making a very foolish mistake. I think the best profit from it is when you have a sparring partner in there that's not intimidated, that's throwing punches and trying his best to get the edge and win like in a fight, trying to knock you out." Most of Mike's sparring partners didn't fare too well in their wars with the young gladiator. A point of proof was the fact that Mike had gone through 24 spar mates in the past 17 months. Kevin Rooney smiled when reminded of that statistic and he said, "I've had guys walk right out. They say, 'This isn't for me,' and they go, or they don't come back, you know. They say they'll call, but they never do. Being a sparring partner for Mike isn't an easy job. The punishment is brutal, but it does have some benefits. The hours are good. You get to travel and see new places, and the pay is good, $600 a week." On Friday, November the 21st, the day before Judgment Day, both Mike and Berbick made their way to the Las Vegas Hilton around midday for the ritualistic 1 p.m. weigh-in and final press conference. The weigh-in was held in one of the hotel meeting rooms complete with stage. The official scale, the fighters, their assistants, the promoters, and the state and local boxing officials assembled on the stage with several hundred media representatives vying for the choice positions near the front of the stage. A huge light beer sign provided a somewhat incordious backdrop to the proceedings. Mike, as challenger, was first to step on the scales. Clad in only blue briefs, the confident New Yorker weighed in at 221¼ pounds, the heaviest of his career. Trevor Berbick was next, and the WBC heavyweight king stood proudly before the press gathering and held the championship belt over his head for all to see and admire. Dozens of cameras flashed as the photographic contingent scurried for the pictures for the evening editions of the nation's newspapers. The champion tipped the scales at a swell 218 pounds. There was no doubt that Trevor Berbick was taking the challenger seriously. This would be Berbick's third title fight and his first defence of the crown. On April the 11th, 1982, Berbick became the first fighter to take Larry Holmes' 15 rounds, although he lost the decision. Then, on March 22nd, 1986, the 6-1 underdog won the WBC title by taking a unanimous 12-round decision from Pinklon Thomas. This time, Trevor Berbick would enter the ring as the champion, but would still be the heavy underdog. On November the 22nd, 1986, Judgment Day came calling. The hype was over. The verbalising had ceased. The training camp stood dark and silent. All that remained now was the main event. Mike slept late. The sun filtering through the shaded window finally rousted him out of bed on the fateful day. He dawdled over a light breakfast, read a couple of boxing magazines, watched the TV, and generally just wasted away the morning. It would be a long day for champion and challenger alike. Tyson was visited by a constant stream of well-wishers during the day, including former D'Amato world champions Floyd Patterson and Jose Torres. Patterson predicted that Mike Tyson would break his record and become the youngest heavyweight champion in history. He said, "That's what Cus wanted. I hope for Cus's sake that Mike wins." Apparently Mike was ready, as he told Floyd Patterson, "I've been preparing for this day since I was 12 years old. I always wanted to be a world champion. This is a man's crown, and I'm going to wear it." Fight time was scheduled for approximately 10:30 Eastern Standard Time. HBO would begin its television coverage at precisely 10 o'clock with personal profiles of both fighters and a preview of the match. Tyson's dressing room for the big event was a portable trailer that had been set up in the Hilton parking lot next to the convention centre. The evening was cool, the sky starry, and the atmosphere was charged with electricity. A sellout crowd of 8,500 excited fans packed the Hilton Centre to view history in the making. It was a strange scene, this title fight almost eerie in some respects. Trevor Berbick was the champion, but it was Mike Tyson whose name was on everybody's lips. The fight was the Mike Tyson fight. It was Mike Tyson this and Mike Tyson that. The kid from Brownsville was already considered to be the new saviour of boxing. As fight time drew near, Mike began his usual warm-up routine in the trailer, shadow boxing to the strains of Sam Cooke coming from his tape system. Flailing away at an unseen opponent, the kid from Catskill bobbed and weaved, jabbed and flurried until the perspiration ran down his sleek brown body in steady rivulets. The stillness of the night was broken by a knock on the door. A voice yelled through the steel wall, "Okay, this is it. You're on." Suddenly, the trailer exploded in raucous noise as half a dozen managers, trainers and handlers all began speaking at once. Someone noted that the desert air was cool at this time of the day in Las Vegas, and that Mike might get chilled if he crossed the parking lot to the Hilton Centre uncovered. Mike was well loosened up by now, and the last thing he wanted was for his muscles to tighten up on the way to the ring. Fortunately, a quick solution was found. One of the trainers grabbed a large white towel from the bathroom and put a circular hole in the centre of it, just big enough for Mike's head to fit through. Wearing his homemade poncho, the young challenger prepared to meet his destiny. As he stepped from the trailer, a reporter asked, "When do you put on your game face?" Mike almost spat out the reply. A sneer crossed his face as he said, "This is no game." The fighters made their entrance to the ring. The bell then sounded for round one, and the fight was on. Mike Tyson came out winging, meeting the champion in the centre of the ring with a flurry of lefts and rights. Trevor Berbick stood toe-to-toe with the challenger, attempting to overpower the younger fighter. That strategy turned out to be the mistake of the fight. 1 minute into the round, Trevor Berbick responded to a Tyson barrage with a flurry of his own, landing a solid right hook to the side of Mike's head in the process. The kid from Catskill walked right through it as if it had never happened. Mike was like a man on a mission, always moving forward, his face frozen in that frightful sneer, his eyes riveted on the centre of Berbick's chest, looking for the slightest sign of an opening. The New Yorker used his stiff left jab to great advantage, keeping Berbick at arm's length, then connecting with a right and left to Berbick's face. A hard right hurt the champion at 1 minute and 15 seconds, but the big Jamaican kept boring in. There was very seldom more than a foot or two separating the fighters during the round. Often they battled head to head. Mike connected with 2 more shots and Berbick beckoned him in, a show of bravado, as if to say, "You didn't hurt me." A left hook, then another right and left found the targets on unprotected areas of Berbick's body. After about 20 seconds of close infighting, the referee separated the 2 men. The determined challenger came back quickly with 2 rights that hurt the champion. A following left hook sent the big man reeling backwards into the corner. Mike was on top of him with 18 seconds left in the round and dazed him with a right uppercut and still another left cross. A right cross found its mark before the belligerent title holder could tie his man up. The crowd was on its feet, screaming at the bell. Berbick tried to stick his tongue out at his adolescent antagonist as he wobbled back to his corner, but he couldn't get it past his mouthpiece. The futility of the attempt mirrored the futility of Berbick's strategy in round 1. Angelo Dundee was frantic in the champion's corner. He was distraught over Berbick's performance, and he let his man know it in no uncertain terms, screaming into his ear, "You're fighting like a damn dummy." Across the ring, Kevin Rooney offered encouragement to his fighter. "You're doing great. Stay calm." The challenger came out fast in round 2, hands held high against his cheekbones in Cus D'Amato's famous peekaboo style. A wide looping right hand to the head stunned the confused champion. Mike quickly followed up with 2 big left hooks, followed by a hard right that lifted Berbick off his feet and dropped him on his back. 8,500 shocked fans leaped from the seats, anticipating the end. The arena was complete bedlam now, but the 32-year-old champion was not yet ready to throw in the towel. He was up immediately, hurt but also embarrassed by his inability to slow down the Catskill brawler. Trevor Berbick was breathing heavily, obviously agitated by the humiliating turn of events. He could see his title slipping away, slowly but surely, and he didn't know how to prevent it. Mike continued the assault, pummeling Berbick in the centre of the ring. The fight became all Mike now. Berbick retreated, trying only to survive the round, to give himself time to regroup. His macho plan of overpowering the youngster from upstate New York had long since disappeared in a fusillade of punches from the 20-year-old challenger. It appeared to be only a matter of time now before Mike would lift the crown from the head of the battered champion. Only 1 minute had expired in round 2, and as far as Trevor Berbick was concerned, a lifetime remained before he could retreat to the safety of his corner stool. The challenger, relentless, had pursued his man for the next minute, punching selectively as openings occurred. Berbick backpedaled and spent most of his time covering up. There was no offence now in the champ's repertoire, only self-preservation. At the 2 minute and 13-second mark of the round, Mike landed a savage right to the kidney and barely missed with a following uppercut. He backed away momentarily and stepped up and caught Berbick with a short left hook to the temple. The punch travelled less than 12 inches, but it completely incapacitated the valiant champion. Berbick hung motionless for a split second, then slumped backwards to the canvas. Courageously, he tried to right himself. He struggled to all fours, but as he attempted to stand, his legs refused to support his huge torso, and he toppled sideways into the bottom strand of the ropes. Still, his champion's heart pushed him onward, and once again he fought to pull himself upright. But again his limbs failed to respond, and he stumbled completely across the ring, finally collapsing in the corner. It was an eerie and terrifying sight. He thrashed about on the floor like a fish out of water, his equilibrium completely destroyed. Already there was concern at ringside that Trevor Berbick might be seriously injured. Finally achieving a vertical position on the 3rd attempt, the game Canadian turned his face to his tormentor, but it was obvious that he was in no condition to continue the fight. Mills Lane stepped in and wrapped his arms around the champion, just as he was about to collapse once more. Mike Tyson had done it. He had taken the WBC title in a most convincing manner, thereby becoming the youngest man ever to wear the crown. At 20 years, 4 months and 22 days, he had eclipsed the old record of Floyd Patterson by more than a year and a half. Mike Tyson was now the WBC heavyweight champion of the world. Now it's at this point, ladies and gentlemen, that we will end the episode. This was part 4. Mike Tyson is now the WBC heavyweight champion of the world. Of course, in part 5, we will follow up post the Trevor Berbick fight and then move in to where things get even more heated up in Mike Tyson's career as we head further into the HBO Unification series and, of course, more stories outside of the ring in Mike Tyson's life. I hope you guys have really enjoyed the episode. It's been great to really get to this point in the 4th part where he's now the heavyweight champion of the world. And this is where I believe, and my opinion is of his career, it really starts to skyrocket from this point forward. It really does. Going into that Unification series as a WBC champion, moving forward and getting involved in all those bigger fights. Of course, we've got still so much left to cover in Mike Tyson's career. As I've said previously in the episodes, if you've been listening, this is probably like a mini-series on its own. The amount of detail that we've picked up from Mike Tyson's life and career is pretty much a career profile series in its own right. I don't know how many episodes we are going to go to with it, but we're certainly not sparing any expense on the detail. We want to give you the most definitive Mike Tyson career profile that anyone's ever done. And I'm really, really happy that we've got some great work going on in the background, and big credit has to go to Hassan, who has obviously been curating the information, putting it together, getting the stories prepared for myself to deliver them, and it's been great so far. Thoroughly enjoyed it. I hope you've enjoyed this 4th part of his career profile too. If you have, as always, do go and let us know on social media. You can do it at the BTR Boxing Podcast on all social media channels. If you've been listening on Spotify, please leave a comment on the episode below. And make sure you're sharing this out there with your friends and family, people that might be interested in listening to this podcast series on Mike Tyson. I've thoroughly enjoyed putting it together with Hassan. I've thoroughly enjoyed delivering it so far. But we've not even scratched the surface yet, ladies and gentlemen. We've still got so much left to cover, and I'm really excited to cover it, and I hope you guys will be continuing to follow us on the journey and Mike's journey throughout his life and his boxing career. That is it for this one. Thank you so much for listening to the show as always. You've been listening to part 4 of the Mike Tyson Career Profile on the BTR Boxing Podcast Network.